Canada's 7 post-pandemic crises. Where are we as a country, and what's to be done? Irvin Studin here, Editor-in-Chief and Publisher of Global Brief magazine. Happy New Year to everyone across Canada and around the world. Post-pandemic, I emphasize post-pandemic, Canada has 7, count them, 7 major crises of system from which we're suffering. I'm going to explain what they are very quickly, where we are in respect of each of them, and how we get out, if we wish to as a country. But there's a lot of work involved. First crisis, and let me, by illustrating the crises, I would like to show how we've had a net drop in the quality of life. You imagine that these are 2 axes. If I take us back to high school or even middle school geometry and math, here's an x-axis, here's a y-axis. Let this y-axis, this vertical axis, be quality of life, okay? And let the horizontal axis be something like time, okay? So first crisis here is the economy, the economic crisis. Okay? I think that's understood broadly, but it starts with the mass disintegration of business. And of course it has manifestations in inflation and varying degrees of employment displacement and such. The second one, of course, is public health in its various forms, late COVID, and all the things that happened during the lockdowns, mental health crises, physical crises, spiritual crises, pressures on the medical system. Education, a crisis that we've discussed at length in our work in Global Brief, at the Institute for 21st Century Questions. In my humble view, and we'll talk about it in a later GB micro lecture, the major catastrophe of the pandemic in human terms for Canada and the world, and the one with the greatest tentacles and consequences for the country and indeed the world. Kids out of school, kids undereducated, destabilization of massive education systems, and into the future, the huge consequences thereof. National unity, we feel it today with what's happening in the West. We see it in Quebec, we see it with the Indigenous question, and we see it with the different borders, both physical and psychological, still amongst the provinces and between the territories and provinces and even within provinces. A massive social crisis. Social crisis, that takes the basic form of the basic form of collapse in the norms of behavior amongst Canadian citizens, store to store, institution to institution, mask on, mask off, vaccine on, vaccine off, third vaccine, fourth vaccine, zero vaccine, and how one behaves in the post-pandemic world. Crisis in institutions, right? Collapse in the performance of government. If one calls emergency services, one wants a doctor, one wants to access education, all of these things are not as reliable, as responsive, or as professional, as competent as they would have been, of course, in 2019, early 2020. And finally, what exercises us quite a bit at Global Brief, the international crisis, and that takes various forms. It's not just the Russia-Ukraine war, it's not just the competition between China and the United States and the West, but it's Canada in particular, weak with very difficult borders at a time when we must be strong. And Canada, indeed, as I've articulated elsewhere, vassalized at a time when we must become a term-setting country if we're going to survive in a very difficult, wicked post-pandemic world. So these are the systems. You might argue with them at the margins, but these are the essential systems. This is where we were in 2020, okay? Quality of life. What happened during the pandemic is that we collapsed all the systems. We went down here. So economy 1, public health 2, 1, all the way down here. So the systems are at this level, okay? Quality of life has diminished manifestly. You feel it in your daily existence. Right? Education is highly diminished. Fewer kids in school, standards diminished, ambition diminished, spirit diminished, the quality of childhood is diminished. The economic activity. I share with colleagues all the time images of businesses disintegrating. You can't resuscitate these businesses overnight. They took decades to build, and we disintegrated them in a very short span of time. So the production structure and the production function of Canada has diminished in its quality and its value add, right, in its attractiveness internationally, and its attractiveness to labor and talent and capital. Institutions, the quality of performance. International, our weakness. All of these have collapsed thusly, and we're here. So our choices are choices as follows. Option one is to get back to where we were in 2020, right up here. So resuscitate the quality of life back to 2020. I'm, of course, for that personally and professionally. Or we could say, we're going to be happy here. We're here at this lower end quality of life, and we'll start to either not understand our circumstances, which I think is partly the present Canadian condition. We don't understand the degree to which quality of life has diminished across the systems. Or we'll tell ourselves stories to the effect that it's okay, we're good. We sentimentalize a lower level, collapsed quality of life, in extremis, a form of misery, right? And we're not to guarantee that these systems won't collapse further. Indeed, I might argue, this is not my central argument here, that we need to actually get up here in 2023 because the world is much more wicked. So Canada needs to up its game beyond where it was in 2020. But we're way down here at the end of 2022, early 23. What is the difference vertically along this axis between where we were in 2020 and where we are at the start of 2023? Answer, energy. And I'm not talking about fossil fuel energy. I'm talking about human energy, national energy. And what we need to get back here is energy, energy, energy. And we need national ambition, national projects that will drive up the systems across the board. And I'm not talking about a discrete approach, education only or the economy only, right? This is a total, almost transversal type of approach that requires huge national energy. None of the proposals or projects on offer or the imagination as it sits today will get us here. They will do the reverse. They will either consolidate the present misery or enhance it, amplify the misery. Again, without us necessarily appreciating that we're miserable. So to get up here, what's on offer? I've argued elsewhere, and we've argued in Plagiar Global Brief, and it's a prominent project at the Institute for 21st Century Questions, that the north of the country, which is a continent unto its own, which borders markets 6 to 7 times larger than the continental North American market alone, is a future source of this human energy. So if we can lift our imagination to build up the north economically, scientifically, institutionally, demographically, that will provide us with, for sure, a good deal of the energy that we need to resuscitate all these systems. Food. The world is desperately in need of food. Canada needs food. Canada can't produce the food. We have enough geography, enough human capital to produce it for ourselves and feed the entire world. But that's a project that perhaps in combination with the Northern Project, right, which I call Whitehorse as the center of the world, as it were, could also generate that necessary energy. And of course, the third one is natural resources and energy. And it's an older vision, but it's still one that's very apposite. Let me offer that all three of these combined could generate enough energy to get us to where we need to be, again, in 2023, 2024. Again, if we have the national energy.